What is up, plant people? Today is Tuesday, October 27th, 2020, and we're back with another episode of the Planthropology Podcast, the show where we dive into the lives, careers, and ambitions of some really cool plant people. I'm your host, Vikram Baliga, and I'm so darn excited to be with you today. Y'all, this is an episode I have been waiting for ever since the show started almost a year ago. We're just 9 days away from Planthropology's first birthday on November 5th. But the whole point of the show is the anthropological connection to plants and to the environment. So today I have archaeobotanists on the show, and that's literally what they study. That is their thing. And I didn't just get one, I got three of them. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a second. But first, I want to talk about something cool that's happening. There are, award shows for movies and television and music and all that. And now there are online awards for podcasts. I mean, it's been going on for a while, but I'm still new to this whole thing, so I'm just finding out about it. But the Discover Pods Awards are coming up, and three of my great, close, wonderful podcast friends have been nominated in different categories, and I'm just so excited for them. So I want you to go and look at the Varmints and Just the Zoo of Us podcasts, which are both great, wonderful animal shows, and they're both in the kids and family podcast category. I don't know how you choose between the two of them. I think I'm just not going to because I can't. And then I'm just going to encourage you folks to go vote in my place. And also, the Petri Dish podcast is in the technology and science podcast category, and with some really great other shows. But I want to encourage you to go vote for a Petri Dish and Varmints and Just the Zoo of Us. And I've included trailers for all three of those shows at the end of today's episode. So go check out those shows. Even if you don't go vote, the link will be in the show notes. But even if you don't go vote, go listen to their shows. Go follow these folks on Twitter and on social media. They're wonderful. They're really wonderful. They're dear friends that I've made, and I'm so grateful for them, and I'm so excited for them to all be nominated. Other housekeeping, like I said, it's almost the show's birthday, so a great birthday present would be a rating and review on iTunes or Podchaser or Castbox or anywhere else that you can leave one. I would much appreciate that. I would be super grateful. Also, go follow us on social media, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. It's Planthropology on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and I am at The Plant Prof on TikTok, where I make ridiculous plant fact videos and other things like that. Okay, I'm just gonna jump into it. I'm beside myself with how excited I am about today's episode. Again, this kind of drills home the point of why I'm doing the show, and talks about our long-term anthropological connection to nature and to the environment. And so I had reached out to someone on Twitter a while back to see if they might be interested, and they said, well, no, I'm not, but I have a professor and a couple of colleagues that might be. So thank you, Angelo, for pointing me in their direction. Also, go check out Angelo's podcast, Sample Excavator. It's really great. If you love music, you will love the show. Also, he makes atlatls. So how cool is that? He was on an episode of the Ologies podcast, and that was a great, really fun one. But I got to interview Dr. Alan Farahani, Lydia Wolfe, and Carlos Romo-Caballero a couple of weeks ago about archaeobotany, about planthropology. Man, can you tell I'm excited? I'm real excited. But we talked for so long, and I felt kind of bad that I kept him that long, but I just had more questions and more questions. So this is actually a two-parter. So you'll get some of the basics about archaeobotany. You'll get everyone's introductions today. And then this Friday, I'm actually going to drop part 2. It'll go into a little more detail about what they actually do, some of the things they found, and all the different research they work in. They were wonderful to talk to. They were so much fun. And I think it's the first time I've actually had undergrads on the show. So it was really a cool dynamic to talk to this professor, Dr. Farahani, and two undergrads that work for him. So Alan, Lydia, Carlos, thank you so much for being on with me. I can't think of a better way to start wrapping up this first year. So again, we'll have part 1 today, part 2 on Friday, and then our last episode of year 1 right before our birthday will be with a special guest who you've heard before, and that's also a really fun episode. So anyway, get your archaeological tools, your shovels, your picks, and your tiny brushes, and get ready for episode 32 of the Planthropology podcast with Dr. Alan Farahani, Lydia Wolfe, and Carlos Romo-Caballero. All right, well, we are up and running and back for another episode of Planthropology, and this is an episode that I've been like posting on Twitter about for a few weeks, and something I've been really excited about. So from the time this show started, the goal has been to talk about the human connection to the environment in a modern and an historical context. And so I have wanted to interview an archaeobotanist or paleoethnobotanist, and we'll talk about which one of those is right and how badly I probably normally butcher it as we go. But it turns out I got 3, and I'm very excited. So with us today, we have Alan, Lydia, and Carlos, who are a professor in archaeobotany and 2 students. And y'all, I'm so excited to have y'all with us today. How are y'all doing?
Doing pretty good.
Great.
Yeah, can't complain.
That's good. I'm glad to hear it. So I guess I'll let y'all. We'll start off, and I'll just let y'all introduce yourselves a little bit more. So, Alan, if you want to go first, we can jump in there and just kind of go around.
Sure. First, I want to say thanks for inviting us on the show, Vikram. We're really excited to be here and really excited to talk about not just our research, but the field in general. Really appreciate the time that you've set aside for this.
Sure.
This very specific kind of nerdy plant time, which is wonderful. So in any case, a little bit about myself, and we can talk more about that, I guess, as time goes on. Right now, I'm an assistant professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in the Department of Anthropology. I'm an archaeologist by training, and my area of expertise, as you noted, is archaeobotany or paleoethnobotany, and also data analysis and visualization with contemporary computational tools. So that is my story for now.
Okay. That's it. You know what? That's actually quite the impressive story, even just so far. So I'm looking forward to drilling into that a little more. All right. Who wants to go next?
I can.
Okay, great.
So I'm a student at UNLV. I've been attending there for, I guess, now like 3 years. I transferred in from another university in Utah, actually, Weber State. I'm majoring in anthropology, and I'm getting another major in biology at the same time. So,
Wow, so you're staying busy.
Yeah, definitely busy.
Do you sleep?
Sometimes,
Okay,
I have to. But.
Yeah, we all have that. That's eventually everyone sleeps. It's just how long do you go between those sleep times? Lydia, how about you?
I'm also an anthropology major. I've been going there at UNLV for approximately 4 years. I don't know if it's 4 years, but since 2017 fall.
Okay.
And I changed my minor a couple of times, and I was wanting to do a minor in biology, but I didn't want to stay at UNLV for so long. So now I'm not minoring in anything. So, yeah.
Okay, so you're almost done then. Probably,
Yeah.
maybe. Okay.
Yeah, next fall I'll be done.
Okay. I know that feeling of like being like in your 4th year and just it feels like it's 10 years long. And I understand where y'all are right now for sure. I've done a lot of school and I know how that goes. So let's start off with the basics of what y'all study. And, archaeology, I think, is a term that, and anthropology probably even are terms that people are familiar with. But archaeobotany is kind of an interesting subset of these studies. Can you kind of give us just an overview of what that means and what y'all do at a overview level?
Sure. That is the $1 million question. The question is, how much time do you have?
As much as you need.
Let's take 4 episodes to unpack this. So the briefest version I can give of that right now is also segues into something I should have said earlier, which is I am also the director of the Paleoethnobotany and Ancient Agriculture Laboratory. And I'll touch upon what that means. So the subdiscipline, as you mentioned, well, let's start with anthropology itself is a really big tent. It includes in North America in particular, includes 4 distinct subfields, all with their sort of own emphasis, but that are all interrelated and need each other. So that's linguistic anthropology, biological anthropology, sociocultural anthropology, and then archaeology. Within archaeology, archaeologists being broadly interested in researching the human past use any technique that is available. So there's a really wonderful recent book on the philosophy of historical science in which the author calls historical scientists like geologists, archaeologists, so on and so forth, methodological omnivores. And I think that characterizes us as archaeologists very much, because anything that we're interested in the present, we'll try to find the tools to study that in the past. And so that could be something like ancient metals or kinship system, or in our case, archaeological plant remains. So the focus of the research of the lab is on the analysis of archaeological plant remains. And when we get to it, we'll talk about, well, the other really big question is, how do you find them? What do they look like, right? That's not something that many people think of when they think of archaeology. I won't say the IJ phrase or movie series, but there's just there's a very strong sort of image that's imprinted in people's minds. But yes, so as you alluded to, and the most succinct version I can give of what these 2 terms mean, and it's really great that it dovetails so well with the name of your really wonderful podcast series, is that archaeobotany, strictly speaking, is just the analysis of archaeological plant remains. So that means looking at their shape, looking at how they preserve, the really fine-grained, nitty-gritty details of botanical identification. So in its strictest sense. Now, the other term that's frequently used, mainly in a North American setting, although the 2 terms are really interchangeable, is paleoethnobotany. Mm-hmm. And there, the emphasis is on the ethnobotany, which is how people use plants. So in that definition, the interest there is really anthropological. It's asking, okay, we've collected these archaeological plant remains, but how does this tell us something about people in the past? So in the paleoethnobotany definition, the end of the analysis, the object of the analysis, is understanding what people do with plants and how plants enter into and structure their lives. So it's a little bit different.
Well, yeah, that's so fast. So so you're saying you rarely have to run from giant boulders? Like that's not part of your job description?
Unfortunately, I cannot say that is not true. I don't want to say rarely, but I have been on field sites where there have been some pretty big stones rolling around. Usually people throwing them around, unfortunately. But
cardio is important, just regardless.
Absolutely. That pick won't swing itself.
No, that's pretty interesting, though. And I think that, again, those basic things you mentioned are big parts of why I was so excited to have y'all on. And so I'd like to hear a little bit from the students, from Carlos and Lydia. How did you how did you end up studying this? What motivated you to want to get into anthropology and more specifically this subset of anthropology?
Well, I'll have to mention the Forbidden movie because that's the one that inspired me when I was like 7 or 8 years old. That one and the Mummy with Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a solid movie. I like The Mummy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those inspired me a lot actually when I was a kid to kind of pursue archaeology because, well, I didn't know what it was. I thought it was more like the Indiana Jones version, right? Running for things with the whip and whatnot. But as I progressed in my studies and finally the time came to apply for college, I said, well, why not? And it turns out archaeology is nothing like what Hollywood portrayed it as.
That comes up a lot.
Yeah, but it's still actually really interesting. I got into archaeobotany through a friend of mine, actually. I'm blanking on her name right now. That's another bad thing about me. I blank on people's names all the time. Anyways, I followed her into the lab, and it was initially just to see what archaeobotany was or paleoethnobotany, because I'd never heard of it before. I didn't even know you could learn anything about ancient cultures through plants. And it's been a learning opportunity for me as much as like me contributing anything for research.
Sure. Well, and sure. Yeah. And at this phase in your, academic career and just life, I mean, that's how it should be, right? It should be a great learning opportunity and a opportunity for you to get to ask those questions that maybe somewhere down the road, if you pursue it farther, you'll get to take a bigger part in answering. I think that's a big, for me, my undergrad was a big part of it. Of yes, getting information, but generating questions that led me farther through my career. And so I thought that was, that's a pretty good, that's a pretty good introduction too into how to treat this phase in your life. And we'll kind of put a pin in that and probably come back to it a little bit. But Lydia, how about you? How did you get into all this?
So as a kid, I don't know if you guys know about it, but Destination Truth, the Josh Gates, I would always be like watching that on sci-fi at like 9 o'clock at night as like 7 or 8 years old. My parents would be like, you need to go to bed. I'm like, I really want to stay up and watch this though. But then as life went on, I kind of forgot about archaeology, and I wanted to be in biology, and I wanted to be like an oral surgeon. But then UNLV put me into unexplored, so I was exploring majors. And because of math scores and SAT scores. So that's how I ended up here. And I ended up exploring majors. I found out about anthropology, and I was like, okay, this is actually pretty cool. I think I'll declare this as my major. And I think it was like my third semester in. I was in Anth 105 with Dr. Liam Frank. And his class, he has so much energy. He was just so enthusiastic about it. And I was like, I think I'll look more into it and see what else there is to offer. And he introduced us to field schools. And I got introduced to Dr. Hari. And I went to the Shivwits Field School in the Shivwits Plateau. It's right by the Grand Canyon. And that's where like my whole love for anthropology and archaeology kind of bloomed. And when I came back from the field school, I was like trying to find something to combine my passion for plants and archaeology. And that's how I kind of came into macrobotany.
No, I think what's so interesting about hearing some of these stories, and I like that y'all brought up our, pop culture perception of science in general, science and study in general. I'm a horticulturist, I'm a botanist, and I think the one that people think about these days are, the Martian, like going to Mars and having to grow potatoes. I've never had to grow potatoes on another planet, but not yet. There's still time. I'm still youngish, but I think it's interesting that even pop culture that gets it wrong, or that gets most of it wrong, is such a great gateway into science. And so even telling little parts of the story, getting people excited is so important, which is one of the reasons I'm doing this show in general. It's just another way to tell the story of different scientists and different fields in a realm that some people don't think is terribly exciting. And I say that as a plant nerd, right? People are like, "Oh, they're just plants, whatever." I don't, all the time. And they're like, "I don't care about agriculture. I don't care about plants, whatever." And I'm like, no, you're missing so much of the story. It's so important that we understand these things. And so, like, this is great ways to fill in little pieces of the puzzle for folks to get excited about all kinds of different fields and all kinds of different sciences. So, Alan, what, you said an assistant professor, so you have done quite a bit of school and writing and researching and all kinds of things to get to where you are. And,
Sure.
In talking to undergrads, sometimes they look at a professor and they're just like, "Oh, you're just a professor and you're here." And I know that I get that a lot from my students sometimes. It's like, "Oh, you just, I don't know, they made you in a lab and you showed up as Professor whatever and Professor or Dr. Baliga or whatever they think of to call me that day." What was your path to get here? What did you study going through school?
Oh man, wow, yeah, another 4 episodes have been added to this one. That's a great question, and I do want to say it. That's also a really good point. All of our sort of shared humanity, and that's kind of the anthropological side of things. Is like you said, we're all still people, and we all still are going grocery shopping, and all still have interests and crazy winding paths that brought us here. And I think it's really important for folks to know that too. Like we also do. Some of us consume certain TV shows and spend time on Netflix that maybe we shouldn't be spending time on, maybe on other things. But as for your question, the shortest answer I could give there again is stereotypically, and I told another group this recently, when I was a kid, I was totally infatuated with dinosaurs. And I don't mean that in like the typical 6-year-old little boy sense, like the kind that my parents didn't want to bring me to other people's houses because they knew I was just going to be going on and on about some dinosaur and they would just be totally mortified that their kid would just not stop talking about, "Oh, but this dinosaur and that dinosaur." So I actually took that passion for paleontology forward. And when I was in high school, I volunteered at a natural history museum when I was in Philadelphia. There were some crazy twists and turns in my life. And I actually majored in linguistics in college. But I was also taking sort of other classes on the side that were my interest in archaeology, because I was just that part of me, that love and interest in the past, the fact that we could know anything about the past at all, the fact that we knew about these like dinosaurs was amazing. The fact, as I came to learn, like, wow, we could know about people, 200,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, and literally look at and touch the things that they made and have this really close connection of people. And people as people really just blew my mind. And so for graduate school, I finally decided, I said, I have this choice between linguistics, which I ended up also really loving, and archaeology. And then I said, you know what? I really also like being outside and working outside. So I ended up choosing archaeology. And still at this point, I was not on the plant path. And so it actually wasn't until a course that I took at that time with doctors Christine Hasdorf and Patrick Kirch. And Christine Hasdorf would ultimately become one of my co-advisors and is a paleoethnobotanist herself who works in the Andes. They taught this class on environmental archaeology, a combination that I didn't even know was possible or existed. And I feel bad for everybody in that course because as a very young graduate student, I think I was leaning 45 degrees constantly in my chair. I was just so mesmerized by what they were saying. I didn't even know that you could study soils in the past in this way, or plants or animal remains, all of these things. I knew about it, but I didn't realize, the kinds of questions that we could ask and that we could answer, the kinds of things that we could learn about people. So it was from pretty much that moment on that it pushed me forward. But unfortunately, stereotypically, I shouldn't say unfortunately, to all the paleontologists who are listening out there and paleobiologists, I'm still reading journal articles on paleontology and paleobiology. So it all started there. And then it ended with plants, which I could talk about much more, but that's pretty much the gist of it.
Okay. Yeah. It again, and I've said this on multiple episodes of the show, but it is never a straight line. Life is never a straight line. And I think that those are the most interesting stories. And I think that's such a good message, again, to send to all of our, not just students, but people who are just trying to find their way through life, is that, listen, follow those twists and turns. There's no problem with having a diverse career or a diverse life in your path to get to wherever you want to go. And, I ran a landscape company for about 2 years, and I made a living digging holes and moving rocks in 110 degree weather.
Nice.
And that taught me, I should go get a PhD. I should go back to school. And it was after I'd finished my master's. I couldn't find another job, and my undergrad is actually in landscape design. So I was like, I can do this. That's something I can do. But looking back now, I realize all the practical skills I learned in contacts and meeting people and the business part of my life. And so I think it's just really cool to hear about people's journeys. Again, I think that's ultimately the point of what we're doing here, is just to tell people's journeys in the story. And I love that. So, okay, let's get into some of the, I don't want to say details or minutia, but into some of the content of I'm trying to, I'll say this, and I'm going to leave this part in because people know that I'm always in a million places. I have 1,000 questions I want to ask you, and I'm trying to limit myself to not make this 8 hours long. I know that we all have lives and things we need to do. So
sure.
This will probably end up being 2 episodes. I'm going to throw that out there now. So, okay, for all of you, and I know that, again, it's one of these, how much time do we have kind of things, probably. But what are some of the most interesting things to you at this point in your career, wherever you are? What are some of the more interesting things you've learned through studying in this field? If you had to narrow it down to 1 or 2 things that really jump, I know you can't. I know y'all out there can't see what we're doing, but everyone's eyes just got real big. Oh my God, how am I supposed to do this? But if you were talking to, let me put it this way. Let me rephrase the question. If you were giving a talk about what you do to, say, a group of high school students that were maybe kind of interested in archaeology or interested in learning about your science, what are 2 things that you think you could tell them that you're excited about that might get them excited about it too?
Wow, that's a biggie.
I like to throw easy questions at people, just to,
I think the major one is, and this was surprising to me because, I kind of took it for granted. It was in the background. I wasn't really aware of it, but it's just how much of the world that surrounds us, even now, is constructed in some way by us humans. And we probably don't even realize it. But this is kind of like what we're looking at in paleoethnobotany, the plants, the weeds that grow on the sidewalk and stuff like that. And that's what's get left behind in the archaeological record. And it's pretty interesting to see that.
Yeah, that's a fascinating way to look at that, for sure. That even the weeds in the sidewalk, tell a story about our society. That's really fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That
And
blew
to
my
kind of-
mind when I first learned that.
It is kind of mind-blowing. And to kind of piggyback off of what Carlos said, for me personally, because when I first started out analyzing the dirt samples, I had no idea what I was looking at, and I would always like feel like, is this a pebble or is this a seed? And I'd be like, Alan, what is this? Or Carlos, what is this? And then eventually I found out, like, if you take like a look at the grander picture, like, because personally, like, you look at the grander picture, but you don't really look at the details in life. But when you start to look at the details, like for the seeds, you can see where the embryo is, and you can decipher if it is a seed or if it's a pebble. So that's what I found really exciting. And then I can also apply that to like my academic life as well, just like not taking like everything in all at once, but like taking like one thing in at a time. So it's like just taking a step back and slowing things down.
Yeah, those are great points.
Yeah. So sounds like the lab director needs to have more input there, Lydia. Sounds yeah.
They helped out a lot. They helped out so much, though.
That's good. Glad to hear it. So yeah, and for my part, I guess the thing that I try to emphasize is the sort two parts, and one of those was in actually, Vic, one of your prompts. So one of them I already said, I tried to emphasize, like, if I am talking to high schoolers, and I have before, I usually bring an object with me that's old in some sense, and I bring it and show it to folks, and I say, like, look at this, like, this was made by somebody, right? Like somebody like you and me, who sat there and took the time and was probably chatting with people, and with their hands, they fashioned this object, and like, what were they thinking? What were they talking about? How were they feeling? Where were they standing? Was it a cold day? Was it a hot day? So relating it in that way, because a lot of the other contemporary sciences, like you said, you're going out there, you're moving rocks or landscaping, but that's today. So you can actually feel and immerse yourself in that environment today. Whereas, we have to engage in so much imagination is so critical to what we're doing. And then the other thing that I would tell them all is, it seems so remote, right? And typically when we talk about things that are related to the past and people in the past, it's the ancients and the people in the past. But we ourselves are their direct descendants. We have to be biologically, right?
Yeah.
There is no way around that. Like, through our parents and their parents' parents and their parents' parents, there is an unbroken genetic line between us and the very first humans who have walked on the earth.
Yeah.
So we are them and they are us in a really real sense. I mean, obviously there are sort of changes that have happened. Evolution has been happening over these 200,000 years, but in a very sort of concrete way, we are them and they are us. And I think, emphasizing that, saying, like, isn't it amazing that we can see that story, that we can tell that story, and understand our past in that way, that it's not just, that different group of people, the ancients who did things differently. Well, yeah, that's us, and in a really important way.
Wow. I'm just taking a second to digest. That's really, like, that's such a profound way to look at it. That we're not. How do I don't even know how to say this. I don't know that I probably can't say it better than you did. But yeah, we're not telling the story of them. We're telling the story of us.
Absolutely.
And that historical context should inform the way that we approach life, that we approach nature, that we approach. So I had a conversation yesterday, and this is just kind of an aside. With one, I chase rabbits. It's
let's go.
What I do. I had a conversation yesterday with one of our students, just kind of standing outside the greenhouse as we were about to head out for the day. We were talking about the way that we approach things like where we build and where we live and all of those things. And where I live in the United States, I'm in Texas on like the southern Great Plains of the US. So right at the southern tip of the Great Plains. And all of this is a very specific example, but the recharge that happens for our aquifer comes through these playa lakes, which are seasonal bodies of water. When it rains, rarely they fill up, but then that water infiltrates, heads down towards the aquifer, eventually ends up, as a groundwater source that we can use later. Very slow, all that. But what we've done over the past 100 or so years that I guess modern civilization has, now there have been people on this land for hundreds and hundreds of years, but like modern civilization, we put Walmarts on them and we, work kind of. So a specific example, we have a playa lake, a big playa lake that's like right in the middle of town. And they literally put a Walmart on it. And then they couldn't figure out why every time it rained, there was 2 feet of water standing in that Walmart parking lot.
Yeah.
Because we didn't look at the land in the way that our ancestors did. Oh, hey, there's a depression. Maybe I don't want to build my house in the bottom of it. We are a grassland. Another example is we are a grassland prairie up here. And so grass fires and wildfires are part of the way of life, part of the natural cycle up here. They started by lightning, all that. And even the early, the indigenous peoples for sure knew how to deal with that, right? They knew how and where to build and where to live and how to move ahead of these fires and all of those things and how to live with the land. And even the early settlers, European settlers that stopped in this area would build sod houses and like sod roof houses that were able to withstand these fires. And then now what we do is instead of trying to live with the land, we try to stop the fires. And then when they do happen, they're terrible. There's so much fuel, there's all these things. And so I think the study of all of that to say, that very long tangent, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
All of that to say is that the study of the way that our ancestors approached nature and food and life is meaningful because I think we have forgotten along the way how to live with the land. Instead, we try to bend it to our will. Instead of saying, this is what nature does, how do we live alongside it? So that it's cool that y'all, in a real sense, like wrap your hands around that and just get to see what our forebearers, who should be us, we should still be them, how they live their lives.
Yeah, and that is just really such a wonderful point, and it actually gives me the opportunity to give a shout out to all the other paleontobotanists that could have been on this show that are doing equally wonderful research and are also fantastic communicators. And I just want to mention some of them by name because I'm going to mention some research that actually touches upon that. And so that's Catherine Chu, University of Alabama, Shanti Morrill-Hart at McMaster, and Jade Dalpom-Gued at UCSD, Rob Spengler at Max Planck, and so many more. There's so many people doing really fantastic work. And now I'm going to talk just really briefly to your point, Vic, which is such an important one, about the kinds of things that we can actually learn from studying archaeological plant remains. And at some point, I'm going to have to explain to the audience what they look like and how we get them.
Yes,
because
please,
I'm sure they're like, but wait a second, what are you looking at?
Right,
I think a lot about that scene in Office Space where they ask, well, what is it that you do here? Because I'm sure anybody could sit in front of a microscope and pretend, right? Oh, yes, I'm hard at work. But there are actually things that we're looking at. But so I'm thinking here of the work of Dr. Kent Lightfoot, Dr. Rob Cutrell, Dr. Chuck Striplin in the San Francisco Bay Area, looking at native land management by the Ohlone people over the past several thousand years. And one of the things that they found is that the archaeological record shows very clearly that there was managed land burning over cycles of several thousand years. So there's this deep, intimate knowledge, and we see this with many folks around the world. Not all the time. And I think it's really important, too, that we don't romanticize people as well,
Sure.
because we have to think about people as people who are making choices. But these are folks who have just tremendous traditional ecological knowledge. And when we talk about, and this can be a sort of controversial topic, especially in conservation ecology or conservation biology. But when we talk about conserving a forest or conserving a grassland or conserving some environment, the question is, to what time, right? And so very often the time that's picked is this, like, really the Pleistocene pre-peopling of North America, rather than thinking about this time in which people are actually very active ecosystem engineers, and that the landscapes that they were managing were very much human-created ones, that they look, quote, pristine, but in fact, these were landscapes that had a deep human imprint on them for specific reasons, for lots of reasons that Native folks today will happily tell people about, in terms of why they were making the choices that they were making, because of this sort of deep historical memory of these things. So like you said, that kind of knowledge and that kind of input is so important. And we do see sort of the happy end of that story, is that there are places like that research group that I mentioned. They have been working with state parks and other places and sort of reintroducing those practices with the Amamutsun, and in order to bring back some of that land management that has been happening for several thousands of years. So yeah, I think that that's a really important point, and it's something that, again, part of the science of it is that we can show empirically. We can actually show, yes, 3,000 years ago this was happening, which is cool and exciting. Depending on, I don't know. I think all three of us here find it cool and exciting, or else we wouldn't be here.
I definitely do.
Yeah, it's always so interesting to see what they were doing in the past. You're like, how are they even doing this? That's so amazing.
Yeah, and absolutely. Oh no, I think that's super exciting. I think that it's such a cool study, and it's such a cool way to approach, again, just approach science, just approach anthropology. So I'm going to put a pin right here, because again, we have a lot more to talk about, and I think this is a good place to stop episode 1. And then cut it so that episode 2 will come out in a couple of days.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So if you're listening, this is the end of the first episode. And I think today's Tuesday. I don't know. Probably I'll release the next one on Friday. The fun thing about this podcast thing is I can just do whatever I want. And so we will pick back up after the break. I don't do breaks in the show. I just, this is new for me. So I'm going to ramble through this and it'll be fine. My listeners at this point are used to me. So we'll pick back up on the next episode with some of what Alan was saying about what are they actually looking at? What are the nuts and bolts of that? As well as we'll hear some more from Carlos and Lydia about, maybe what they want to do with their careers and where they want to go. And we'll kind of try to tie this all up in a neat package that will still leave room for several more episodes. So thanks for listening. Y'all are awesome. We will see you very soon. Yo, is it Friday yet? Is this new episode out yet? I can't wait. It's going to be so good. So thanks for listening today. I hope you are super excited like I am about Friday and part 2 of this great series about archaeobotany that's going to come out. Again, thanks so much to Alan, Lydia, and Carlos for being on with me. Thank you to the Texas Tech Department of Plant and Soil Science for all the support, for letting me do this the past year, and for just being a great encouragement and a great source of information and help as this goes on. If you'd like to support the show, check out patreon.com/planthropology. Join our other patrons in supporting the show. So thanks so much to those of you who already support. That's all. Get ready for Friday. I'll see y'all soon. And get ready for the trailers for the Varmints, Just the Zoo of Us, and Petri Dish podcasts that are just about to start. And don't forget to go vote. So get ready in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, my name's Paul, and I'm not an animal expert.
I'm Donna, and I'm not an animal expert either.
And together we do a podcast about animals called Varmints.
Every week we pick an animal, do a bunch of research on it, and bring you some interesting facts about that animal.
But we don't stop there. We talk about that animal in movies, TV, and other pop culture.
And we talk about whether or not that animal would make a tasty dish, and how intelligent we think it is on the scale of 1 to 10.
It's exactly like one of those fancy PBS nature documentaries.
Except with more poo jokes.
New episodes go live every Thursday wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Or you can visit us at blazingcariboustudios.com.
Varmints! Varmints!
Hey there, new friends. This is Ellen Weatherford. Do you like animals? Do you enjoy arbitrarily rating things out of 10? Can you tolerate puns? If so, join me and my husband Christian over at Just the Zoo of Us for a weekly review of your favorite animal species. Just the Zoo of Us is available on Spotify, iTunes, and other podcast apps. You can find us at anchor.fm/justthezooofus. See you soon.
Ich bin ein
Science!
Cannabinoids, genetics, coronavirus, dogs. This is Petri Dish.
Science!
We're a science podcast exploring complex subjects with clarity and evil humor. Join the scientific revolution. Join Petri Dish, dropping every Monday on anchor.fm/Petri Dish.